Hi, welcome to Journey into Parenting. Um, I wanted to make a video to kind of answer a question that I think a lot of you might be asking at the moment, which is how do I kind of thrive or come into a harmonious way of being in this kind of current coronavirus world that we're living in. So you might find that suddenly you're having lots and lots of time with your children, and you might be kind of used to having childcare or sending them off to school. Um, and I wanted to talk about this in particular because I've been home educating my son for a couple of years. So it's not such a huge change for us. So I wanted to kind of share some of what I've learned through that experience. And I'm really excited to have Orla back, so we can kind of talk about this from a sort of neuroscientific, kind of therapeutic perspective as well. Yeah, so Orla, do you want to start by talking about your kind of experience of the lockdown?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, as I think a lot of people, it's such a lovely, right, to get more time with your kids. For some of us, not for everyone. I realise some people are working really hard, right? Some people are key workers, or they're working really long shifts. So not for everyone, but for a lot of people right now, there's some with your kids, which can be amazing because a lot of us think on a day-to-day basis, oh, I wish I had more time with them, and now suddenly people do. So it's a lovely opportunity. Certainly, I've been finding it a really lovely opportunity to have with them. So that's been lovely. Yeah, but I think I recognise that there's challenges too, right? So I have lots of ideas for you about what to do to help with that, to help with those challenges.
Great.
So first of all, I think that it's important to remember that the kids normally have much more than you have their friends, and they have their they have the other adults in their life as well, probably, and they have other activities they do that don't necessarily include you on their age. So in a way, you're doubling up for a lot of functions right now, right, from their point of view. And so I would say just for you, because probably for most of you, you're also under stress. That I think spending extra time playing at whatever age they are is actually a idea. So because this will connect you when we become playful, we go into quite a cortex-led state, where we're very connected with the intellectual parts, which makes us feel calm, makes us feel confident, helps us to bond with other people and to get on well with them. So if you have like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, that's easy to see, like what is playing. Of course, you know what it means to play a game with them, right? And just to allow yourself more time for that than you normally would be really helpful for you and them, I think. As well, when they're playing, they also go into this amazing cortex-led state, right? And then you might think, well, okay, but I've got a 12-year-old or I've got a 15-year-old, like we don't really play anymore. All I mean there is just simply any activity that they really enjoy, or that you really enjoy, because sometimes this can be a time to explore each other's interests, right? So if you can do anything with your child of whatever age they are that connects with skills, interests, or with your valued person, there can be an element of play there because you're reaching into this more playful part of your brain. So perhaps it might be a time to introduce them to something you're interested in they may not know that you're interested in, or perhaps if there's something they're interested in that you normally don't spend too much time talking to them about, this might be a really good time to investigate that with them and find out more about that. Yeah, because anytime we're connecting, I mean, if there's something you're both interested in, fantastic, do loads of that, right? But that's not always the case. But if you can overlap activities that feel relaxed, enjoyable, and that connect with your interests, that's really fantastic for bonding, maintaining a good bond.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's making me think about the fact that in a way it's important not to kind of fake it. So it can be tempting
Yeah.
for children to feel like we've got to pretend that we're kind of interested in something when actually we're not, and that it's much better if you can sort of find that overlap, like find things that are genuinely fun for both of you, then that can really help bonding to happen. I think also what you just said helped me to understand something that works really well for me in my parenting, which is I find that if I invest some time in having that kind of, that really high quality sort of playful interaction with my son, it's kind of like he's then sort of filled up by that, and he's much more able to be kind of self-sufficient and go off and do his own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's also advice that I'd offer people who are new to home educating, is that children are actually incredibly capable, um, and that if you kind of give them back some responsibility, they can really kind of, you know, grow in a sense of pride. And it's just generally a good skill for life. Like this morning, it was really sweet. So my son kind of, because I normally, you know, I've got a kind of schedule for my day around when I work and that kind of thing. And this morning, he decided that he was going to make his own schedule, and yeah, I could see that he felt really good about the fact that he was doing that, and also, you know, how brilliant for him for the whole rest of his life that he's, you know, he's able to be kind of self-disciplined and organize his time, and, you know, those kind of things.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really great. And it's so true, what you're saying there about that if you invest the time in playfulness,
Mm.
actually this can be a way for you both to be happily, independently engaged afterwards, right? So
Mm.
I think sometimes, because I'm also aware that a lot of people are working and looking after their kids almost time, right? And that can feel quite overwhelming. That's like another pressure. And you know, it might seem like, okay, well, I'll spend time with them later when I've done the work, you know, and kind of try and put that on hold because I'm very busy and I have lots to do. And I can really understand that. It's a very unusual situation everyone's in. But I think it's so true to just to what you very, very, you know, that really speaks to me there, that actually, even if you were looking at it from kind of a brute efficiency point of view, right, and you didn't even care about how people felt care about that, but even if you didn't, you know, a good way to have more time for whatever you need to do, you know, if you need to get some work done, a good way to end up with that time for yourself while you're just happily playing over there in a corner is actually to first of all invest time in playing together.
Mm.
Because just as you say, they will be filled up from that. That will be reassuring for them. That will be calm. That will make them feel loved. They will benefit so much from your attention in that way, that connection. And then in that calm, playful state, they will be, you know, be much easier for them to go off and play their own game, or to, you know, to think, oh, mom, dad, I'd like to do this now. You know, they will, because you have more ideas when you're in that cortex-led playful state. That's where you come up with ideas, and that's where you connect with the things that you are passionate about or you enjoy doing. So if you can help someone lead themselves into that state,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, that's the best thing for independent play as well. And I think we all want a balance, right? Everyone wants, you know, ideally, you can't, well, depending on how young your kids are. If your kids are very little, sometimes they're going to just want to be with you, right? But you know, beyond a certain age, probably kids and parents benefit from some time together and some time apart as well. So
Yeah, and it's great, you know, if you can help them to be able to access that flow state where, you know, where they're very creative and, you know, they're coming up with ideas of games to play or activities to do. And it kind of reminds me of, there was an article sent home by my son's kindergarten one day about what to do if your child tells you that they're bored. And what I've discovered is that if my son comes and tells me he's bored, I can list, you know, 10 different activities, and he won't be interested in doing any of them. And what I've come to realize is that it's not really that he needs me to think of something to do. It's actually that he's in pain in some way. You know, he's feeling sad or he's feeling lonely. So it's much more effective for me to come into connection with him and help him to get into a kind of more balanced emotional state, and then he starts to be able to access his own creativity.
absolutely, absolutely. Like boredom, the idea of boredom can be a mask for a whole lot of things. And maybe, like you say, the person's upset, but they may not even realize they're upset. But I would link it very much with the freeze state. So if you think about those stress responses, fight, flight, freeze, freeze being the state we go into when we're feeling a sense of threat, and want to retreat or to hide. You know, and it's about waiting out the ice storm or hiding from the predator. That's where that response comes from. I think that definite part in boredom, in the idea of boredom, because it doesn't really make sense if you think about it, right? We all have things that we enjoy, that we're interested in. We all have in our cortex, we have loads of memories, all of the memories of our whole life, of things that we enjoy doing, that we can access at any time, and we all have skills we can access. So really, in terms of their true self, usually is bored ever. That's just the primitive mind kind of getting in the way and really blocking your access to the things that you're interested in and the things that you find really engaging. So absolutely, what's needed there, if you're feeling bored, is to either help yourself or have someone else help you to get back to that cortex-led flow state, as you say, and that may be a need for connection, and that may be helpful. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think it's also making me think about questioning the whole idea that we need to kind of sort of discipline or punish our children, because my opinion is that when children are sort of behaving in ways that we find difficult, it's actually because something's going on within their brain that they're not in control of. That if they're kind of acting angrily or they're withdrawing, it's because they've sort of retreated into that primitive brain. So rather than punishing them, we need to sort of help them to find a strategy to get back into the thinking brain, or to get back into a different state.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that may involve always, but sometimes that may involve shifting your own state first, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So sometimes you might also be feeling frustrated or or bored or whatever, and sometimes someone else showing those feelings can connect you with a sense of feeling that way yourself. There's a primitive mind tug where if someone else is in that state, someone else is angry, particularly if you're very close to them, and of course we're emotionally very close to our children, this can connect you to your own sense of anger or any of that stuff, being upset, being anxious, feeling bored, feeling unhappy. So in terms of a technique out of this, I've talked already about interest. You can play playfulness generally. That's fantastic. But if you're in a state yourself where you're finding it quite difficult to do that, right, where that feels like, well, I don't want to play right now, then there's you can do to put yourself into that state, and then you can help your child get into that state as well.
Yeah.
So I would use a technique here called like a golden light technique. So this is actually and it's where you imagine, well, you can do this in a number of different ways, but I think in this situation I'm going to suggest, if you were not feeling great yourself, that you imagine yourself like sort of by a kind of golden light, right? And you're going to see this as representative of care, of love. So that's kind of your own care and love for yourself. And then if you see your child, particularly if they're with you, this can be very powerful. Imagine that they are surrounded with golden light. And you kind of want to lean into that feeling you get, like if you're putting your child to sleep, if you're saying goodnight, think about if they're older, think about when they were younger and you were doing that kind of goodnight ritual, and they were all cuddly and you just felt like, oh, they're the most beautiful world. Oh my goodness, they're amazing. I love them. That's the kind of feeling you want to tune into by surrounding them in this golden light. So it's kind of it's a visualization of the way that you feel about them in that kind of true, like loving way. And if you can connect with that, this will then absolutely shift your state, pick up from you that you're doing this, right? They're not necessarily going to know that you're surrounding them with golden light, don't worry, but they will feel that you've shifted emotionally and that you're giving them a particular kind. And then that can be a way in then to think, okay, what could I do that's playful? Or what could I do that's, I mean, humor can also be great, right? Sense of humor also to our cortex. So anything you can do that's silly together, or funny, or sometimes people have joint sense of humor and sometimes they don't. So that may work well or less well depending. Where it feels kind of interesting or playful, you want to go for things where it's like you're both having a good time, basically. And if you're having trouble accessing that, go for something like the golden light technique first. Make yourself kind of soft, gentle, loving towards them, and then think, what would be nice to do?
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of taking time to take care of your own state first. And I think sometimes, if you've gone quite far into your stress response or into a kind of depressed feeling, so I think try and give yourself 10 minutes
Oh,
to,
absolutely,
you know,
yeah. Uh-huh.
to journal, or just, you know, if you need to be away from your child, to come back
Yeah,
into a more balanced
yeah,
state, and then reconnect
sure.
with them. But I,
Yeah.
yeah, I use kind of theatrical improv games quite a lot with my
Oh,
staff.
okay.
Yeah, just kind of ways of sort of being silly together, I suppose, or, you know, just kind of playing with kind of rhyming words, or yeah, just kind of very simple
Mm,
things can be.
yeah,
But I think it's like
that's
that
lovely.
it arises from just from me enjoying being with him. You know, making eye contact is really important. I use that technique actually of putting him in a bubble of light, and I think, you know, I guess the thing with kind of theatrical improv is it's about being very true to the moment. So
Mm,
rather than kind of doing something pre-planned, just actually letting your child kind of guide you somewhat into a
lovely.
game, and, you know,
Mhm.
using their imagination. That.
Mm,
Hmm.
that's beautiful. Yeah, that's really lovely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
great. There was something
Uh,
really interesting that you said the other day about how if we're feeling critical of other people, that also kind of puts us into a flight or fight mode.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I'm just going to return quickly. I'm just going to return quickly to what you said about taking 10 minutes for yourself, right? And absolutely,
Mhm.
that's so important. I think when I was thinking that you would just kind of try and shift your state in the room with them, that's more like if you're just feeling a bit grumpy,
Mhm.
just feeling, there's different levels of this sort of thing, right? Or just feeling
Yeah.
a bit tired. But if you're feeling very anxious or very low, then yeah, absolutely, you're probably going to need some time by yourself
Mhm.
to work. And I would say absolutely fine to use screens, right? Stick on a video for them for 10 minutes. That's not
Mhm.
going to ruin their brain. 10 minutes, and go and do some deep breathing, lie on the floor,
Mhm.
imagine a beautiful scene, slow down your breathing, or do something that you enjoy. Simply, read a book that you love, or, do yoga, or turn on some music and sing. If that's what you like to do, so do something enjoyable. Whatever's going to powerfully shift your state at that time. And probably you know best yourself what that is. That's not necessarily going to be everyone. And
And I think
then,
it's like if we've lost access with the, you know, with the thinking part of our brain, sometimes you might need somebody else to fill that role for you. So, you know, potentially
yeah,
using that time to phone a friend and, you know,
absolutely,
get
yeah,
them to offer a different perspective for you can sometimes help to
yeah,
bring you back to a more balanced state.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Our friends and people we're close to, they can really powerfully remind us of who we really are, right? If we've
Mm,
got like a really strong kind of cortex to cortex bond,
yeah.
where we share particularly, or we've learned skills together, or we just really, really enjoy spending time with that person, and we find that they lift us, that's a really good person to phone in that kind of situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then to answer your question, I've forgotten your question. Oh yes, being critical of other people.
Oh,
So yeah, that can definitely, yeah, be true. That can shift your state the other way, right? So, and we can get into these just like little kind of feedback loops with our children or with whoever we live with, right? Kind of a bit of a loop of
yeah.
saying to yourself, "Oh, they always do this,"
Mhm.
or "God, I hate it when they blah blah blah," or um, just that we can something be actively criticizing, but just attaching words to that person repeatedly that are
Mhm.
negative in some way. For example, if you see your child having a tricky time with some of this, as is compatible and would be very normal to, they've had their activities restricted, they're missing their friends perhaps, you might say to yourself, just for example, oh, you've got a son called Joshua, you say to yourself, Joshua is so lost right now, right? And that might seem to you like just a very empathic thing to do, right? You're just kind of you're noticing that he's struggling and you're describing that struggle to yourself. But then imagine that you say that to yourself repeatedly, right? You might say every day for a week, several times, oh, Joshua is so lost, he's really struggling with the situation, right? But think about it in terms of a description of Joshua, right? You're saying Joshua is. That's quite a powerful. You're literally kind of to your brain. You're
Mhm.
describing who he is as a person, and you're saying he's lonely. And there's probably other ways that you could describe him that would be positive, right? So it's not that you have misinterpreted this necessarily. Maybe there is a sense of feeling lost going on for him, right? But maybe in what ways is he coping with that, right? And in what ways is he showing excellent resilience? And like, what, it would be different for different children, but you'd want to ask yourself questions. If you're trying to connect with describing someone positively, you want to ask yourself questions like, what strengths are they showing in this situation? What resources are they accessing to help them deal with this? And what excellent qualities they have that are going to help them get through this excellently? And what do I just love about them as a person, right? And then you sort of scribble down your answers to all of that, and you might come up with a sentence that's more like, Joshua is resourceful and strong. And doesn't that just sound a lot better and feel a lot better to say to yourself again and again than Joshua is lost, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that we are trying to ignore that there are things going on, but it's particularly important when you're using language like is, right? Either don't use is about anyone ever, or if you're going to use is, if you're going to use that person is, always have a positive thing at the end of it. So if you're going to think about negative behaviors or actions, don't equate them with identity. Basically, don't link them up with words like is or be. You can describe, when he said that, there seemed like a real sense of being lost in what he was saying, right? That's fine. Or yesterday, when he said this particular thing, it seemed like he might be experiencing a sense of loss, right? That's fine. So we can use those behaviors or actions or moods, sure, things that pass and go. The is sounds to our brains very, very permanent. So just to be really aware of how we're describing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It reminds me of I read a study that was done on how we praise children, and children who were told you're intelligent, apparently they've become they see that as a sort of fixed thing, whereas children who are told, you're displaying, oh, it was really great when you did such and such, or you kind of praise a specific action, they have a kind of a more flexible sense of themselves, and they're less attached to that particular identity. And in the study, they got the two groups of children to do a test, and the ones that were kind of given specific praise for their actions actually performed better than those who were told you're intelligent, because it somehow, like, they were sort of, it made them more fearful, like they were kind of trying to protect this this kind of fixed sense of identity.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I think you're quite right, and that probably the higher level for all of us to try to get to is to just not use is, right? Let's just not use these fixed identities and limit us, even if they are positive. Absolutely. I think sometimes at the same time, when you're starting off with this kind of approach, the is positive can be quite helpful in replacing or in taking the power away from kind of a strong felt is negative statements. So there would be disagreement about this. Thinks that positive identity statements are a good idea. So there's definitely disagreement. Different therapists would tell you different things there, right? But I definitely think if it's a very strong pattern that you've been saying to yourself for years, like for example, and you probably wouldn't say this about your own child, would you? Maybe you would, Isabel, or I don't know, like Peter is always arguing or something. Strong negative is statement that you've repeated to yourself like a lot. I would say the first step there would be to make some kind of positive is statement. So just to retrain your brain, almost see it as you're kind of guiding yourself, so that every time their name comes up in your head, you're making sure that you're routing that to positive characteristics of them and strengths that you see in them. But absolutely, properly, to add on to that, it's a good idea to see those as not terribly fixed either. So even if you're saying those positive is statements, to see that as something and that you might be saying different positive things about them tomorrow, and probably the higher level of it, as you say, is to be completely flexible, right? And to be just describing in the moment the wonderful things this moment, and then next moment there might be other things, and it can all grow and change. Yeah, absolutely.
But it can be difficult to do that. But something I wanted to mention that I found really helpful is so in terms of like having critical thoughts about people, it's important to have an awareness that that subtly you're not only harming the relationship with them, but you're also kind of harming yourself by putting yourself into that kind of fight or flight state, and that can kind of escalate quite quickly. I did this exercise like some years ago now, where I had a hair bubble on one of my wrists, and every time I noticed myself making a judgment or a criticism about somebody else, I would just move the hair bubble over to the other wrist. That was it. And like, just by kind of tying the physical action to the awareness of the thought, I really kind of, I broke that pattern quite quickly, which I thought was really interesting, like a really kind of useful technique for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's really true. Yeah. And yeah, that's very powerful. Yeah, and I think something that we should also be aware of in terms of things that you might want to kind of catch yourself and move yourself away from. There's a kind of triangling thing that we can do as well, where so and this could be two parents doing it with each other when they're talking about, or this could be like someone on the phone to their friend and they're talking about the child. So in particular, watch how you're talking about your child when your child isn't there, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And you don't want to say anything about your child that you wouldn't say. Well, this is confusing because sometimes you might need to, right? If it's stuff that, if they're very young and it's simply stuff that they wouldn't understand, or that's not really what don't speak any less kindly about your child than you would if they were right in front of you, right? Because just as you say, it has all kinds of impacts in terms of the way that you're them in your brain, your view of them generally, and also your own emotional state. If you're it might feel like, oh, I just need to vent, but if you're on the phone to your friend and you're saying, oh God, he was so annoying today, that might feel good for a minute. It might feel like a sense of relief, right? And then that friend, maybe they're annoyed at their kid and they might be saying, oh, they were driving me up the wall, I cope with this, can't wait. That might feel for both of you like you're kind of bonding as well, right? But it's a very like primitive mind to primitive mind bonding when we're kind of complaining about people in a joined way. And actually what would be more useful for you and for that other person is if you could be bonding in like an intellectual mind to intellectual mind way. So you could be talking about the bit you did enjoy, or like what you have found really amazing about your kids that week, or and anything that kind of lifts you. That's going to be more helpful in terms of the whole week or the whole next 3 weeks. That's going to actually be more beneficial for both of you. So yeah, absolutely, just to watch what we're saying. It's a really interesting thing basically where this triangle, it's from a book called Games People Play. I've read just like transactional analysis, and has all these different kind of games in that book that people engage with, and the idea is it's kind of almost swapping points for points. So like if I say hello to you, I'm quite expecting you to say hello back, and this is a little bit like I've given you a token and then you're giving me back a token. And if I said hello and you just didn't say anything, I'd kind of feel a bit like you owed me something, right? So there's a lot of transactional stuff going on all the time, and one of the patterns we can fall into is where we are, say I'm talking to you about someone who we both know, and I'm kind of complaining. This does feel quite strengthening for us, but it's not very kind to the other person. And it's actually not good for us either, because we're bonding in a really primitive mind way that's releasing adrenaline, it's releasing cortisol, it's not favors. And similarly, sometimes it can even seem kind. Sometimes it could just be me and you talking about someone we know, and I could be saying, oh, they really don't help themselves today. I know, gosh, they are struggling, aren't they? They could do with doing this. Wouldn't it be better for them if they did that? I know, I keep telling her, but this kind of thing that we can get into where we're kind of, it can seem kind, right? But we are kind of looking down on someone, or we're kind of, to an extent, there's two people making themselves feel superior by talking about another person as inferior. And people, unfortunately, do this all the time with kids, right? Because they're such easy targets for this kind of thing, because children don't have a developed cortex yet, so of course they're going to be emotional, and they're going to be more like difficult to negotiate with sometimes, and they're going to be less rational sometimes. That's just part of the way that their brains are. So the more kind of we can be about and like generous towards the fact that they are children, they have different brains than we have, they need to express themselves in different ways, and not be kind of criticizing that with other grown-ups or kind of being ourselves from it, the better, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a better thing would be just to to model for them and to help them develop the emotional skills that they need to become more balanced. Like, for example, helping them to name their emotions in the moment,
Yeah.
or just kind of offering them soothing and compassion if they're not in a place where they're able to hear that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what the piece you just said about gossiping and those kind of interactions, that it's kind of, again, it's one of those things where, you know, it might feel good in the short term, but actually there's a price to pay for that, not very far down the line. And I think one of the costs is that, you know, if we bond through gossiping, as Brene Brown talks about this, that it
Oh
means that
yeah.
on some level people don't really trust us, because, you know, they know that
Sure. Yeah.
we're kind of next in line.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. Cool. Well, there have been so many interesting points that you've made. The line was a little bit glitchy, so I'll type out a transcript to
Sure.
post as well, just to make sure if you're watching, you get all of the amazing information.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just wanted to finish by talking about the fact that I guess the opportunity that we have at the moment is to kind of like lean into the relationships with the people that are around us, and allow
Mm.
those to kind of to be mutually supportive, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's lovely. That's beautiful. You know, I think that's a really lovely way to view this whole time. You know, and again, I just want to say that of course it's not like that for some people are working 18-hour shifts and so on, right? So, you know, God love those people, and thank you for all the work that you're doing if you ever see this. You know, for many of us, we have more time with our children now than we do normally, and it's an opportunity to kind of to set things up that will be beneficial in 5 years' time. You know, so yeah, absolutely, to lean into this as an opportunity for bonding and for yeah, I think that's a really lovely way to view it.
Yeah, great. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.